Was there a point in your life where you kind of saw light for the first time, where it kind of clicked with you that that's like a tool that's interesting to use for you?
I don't feel like I remember a certain point in time where I first realized like how much I was looking at light in my life. But I think for me, like when you ask that question, to me it's just I always realize that I'm observing light, especially during sunset hour. Like there's just something about the color and the way it hits and the angle that I just stop for whatever that I'm doing. I stop for like a few good minutes and I stare at it and sort of feel what the light is giving me, whether I'm outdoors, indoors. Yeah.
Is that something, since you've been basically had a professional training, that you're doing this, or you think that's been going on even before you started to take a camera in your hand?
I think it was way before, like even as like a kid, without a camera, just by eye, I find myself looking at the way light falls, and especially when it interacts with nature, trees, plants, the shadows. Nothing technical training about it. It's just like how I feel at that moment in time when like it's a combination of like the wind, even the sound you hear, and then you stop for a moment and you just look at what's around you.
Do you sometimes have the feeling when you're lighting that reminds you of things from your childhood? Like, oh, I remember this feeling, that there's this click and connection?
Maybe. I don't think I have the direct connection of like, this reminds me of that specific point, but I think it's more like a very fluid thing where like that sort of feels like something I've seen before, done before, and it feels right at that moment in time when I'm doing this particular thing or like shooting this particular scene. Like it's just a memory, you know. Yeah.
I was DP. I worked a lot with him. We were lighting a scene once, and he was frustrated and totally not happy what's happening, and he started muttering to himself, "You're always chasing the light of your childhood." I was starting to think, okay, that's where we're going. And since then, it's always become this thing for me where I started to think about what actually was the light in my childhood, right?
Yeah.
And to be able to go back to that and to say, okay, it's like, is that there? Does that interest me in a part? Where do you grow up?
Singapore.
Singapore.
I grew up here.
Yeah.
Singapore.
What's light for you in Singapore like?
Harsh.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a lot of like top down, very, very bright sunlight, very, maybe that's why I find that I really like the sunset timing, where it's still as strong, but there's something soft about it.
It's interesting because what I've seen, I mean, I've only been here now for 2 days, but it's like this clouds and winds comes in, and when it's harsh, like now, it just really pops up.
Yeah.
Then it goes again.
It's like no in between. It's like either here or here, A or B. Yeah. So it's literally trying to find like small pockets that you get like the perfect in between. About the light here. Yeah.
What's perfect for you? It's a question I know you can't answer.
I don't know. I mean, again, sunset hour.
Yeah.
Like it's the perfect amount for me.
Yeah.
Color, the way it hits, the intensity, everything. Yeah.
So, but when you're lighting, there's always this part about, we always can play around forever, right, before you have to shoot. But is there this part where you say, okay, it's fine, let's do it? What do you have, like, I don't know, a checklist within you that you go through, that you understand, okay, this is fine for me now?
Not really. Maybe I sort of like start with the space, and then I see what it is that I'm lighting, like if there's a character or if it's just a space. And then from there, it's like shaving it down more and more and more into like specifics of like, okay, if you're shooting a tighter shot or a specific shot, like what do I shave off here, or what do I add a little bit more to highlight this certain thing. So I don't think there's a specific checklist that I go through, but I guess I just start with like the general, and then I move downwards.
You mentioned earlier that you're lighting for rooms mostly. The way you see rooms?
Yeah.
Is that general for you, how the whole space starts to feel?
Yeah, because I think like most important for me, because I shoot a lot of narrative stuff, and for me, like I really care about what the room feels like, especially for an actor when they step in, it has to be the right space. So I tend to make sure that when I step into the room, I feel like that light or whatever that I'm doing in that space, it fits what I'm shooting. So I start with the room first, make sure the environment is what I want it to be, and then I start focusing on different aspects or like specifics of where the character is or where they're moving. Yeah.
Is there an emotional connection for you with the actor, like the actress, like what they're feeling is what you're trying to do with the feeling as well with the image?
Yeah, more or less, which is why I really like to sit down and go through the script with the director a lot as well to find out like what is exactly the headspace of that character at that moment in time, so that when I light or when I frame, I try to bring that out as much as possible.
I once ran into a movie where like we were standing saying, okay, how are we going to light this? It was a war movie and the whole thing was so depressing anyway. And there was this scene where really the parents have been locked in for years in a city, in their house, and then the kid came back from the countryside. And I out of nothingness, I said, well, why don't we do the opposite? Why don't we light it like with sunlight coming in and just kind of counterpose that? And the director and the DP was, oh my God, let's do this, right? And then we lit it, and the first thing that happened when the actors stepped in is something doesn't feel right. And this intellectual jump doesn't work at all, I found out. It's like it really has to be one.
Yeah.
But it was cool. Director said, let's stop, let's relight. So it was...
I mean, it's good to experiment as well, like to see whether, who knows, maybe the actor would have like enjoyed the different space, yeah. But it's interesting like to see how, because especially when you do blocking on set as well, it changes everything, you know, your actor comes in and this doesn't work and you gotta think on the spot and come up with something that it works for them as well, not just for the image, you know. Yeah.
Do you tend to pre-light? How does it work with actors? Do you like do a general lighting here and then you've got rehearsals and then you go into fine-tuning? Or
depends on the budget.
Okay.
Sometimes, a lot of the times here, you don't have the budget, so you can't really pre-light. The best way is honestly, you just get the actors in first. They see the space, you see how they move, you see how they react to stuff, and then you start bringing in the lights, you know. Yeah.
I've seen, watching the work of yours, the complexity you put into detail, and I was wondering how that plays off, like when you're lighting a whole room. Because obviously when you're lighting a room, there's a different kind of complexity than when you go into close-up. Do you relight, or you just kind of tend to stay with the space?
Most of the time, I tend to stay with the space, but if I have the chance, I would like relight just a touch to make sure, or move their positions just a touch so that they hit like some of my lights that I've lit for the general space. But I try not to go too close or bring too many things too close to the actors, even when I push into the close-ups, yeah.
When you're lighting a room, right? Do you kind of just tend to wash it with light, or are you going in for pockets and creating?
More pockets, if I can. I will do more pockets because it's easier to block them in a way that they go in and out of light, rather than one big wash and you're just stuck within that, either one space or the other, you know, you don't have the options. That's why I try to like give pockets, either with like multiple sources coming in or practicals on set, you know, so it's a little bit more dynamic in that sense, and it makes my life a little bit easier, especially if you're doing like handheld 360 kind of stuff.
I mean, what I've seen, I think that's a secret to the amazing quality of your work, is that what happens is because you get a complexity all of a sudden. Do you deal the same way with colors?
Yes, kind of, but not to that level just yet. But I'm quite sensitive to what color goes on set. And if I can control it with the production designer, I do, and even the wardrobe, I do try and make sure that there's a consistency and a coherence to whatever that we're shooting. Because sometimes like, whatever color that they give in terms of like wardrobe or even like props or whatever you see on set affects the general lighting if I want to do color as well. So I try to be more specific with colors as well.
And in terms of lighting, do you like to use colors, or you try to stay as neutral as possible and just do it in art?
I think I try to stay quite neutral, but I do realize, because I did say like my favorite time was like sunset, right? I do realize that I tend to be quite warm. Yeah, like whether it's daylight or morning light or sunset or whatever, I tend to push towards like the warmer side of things, like even in color grading as well. Yeah, so like I would prefer a tungsten over HMI, for example.
Yeah. How do you deal with different skin tones and colors with that? Because I've seen you've got a lot of Indian people here, so it's very different ranges of skins.
I think it's just tweaking. You sort of like get used to, or you just by eye you realize like which skin tone takes which kind of like better, and you just accommodate to that. So it's not that of a challenge in that aspect. I think it's relatively, because it's quite like significant. You can see it immediately when they sit on screen, like what skin tone takes which like better.
Yeah. Do you have any influences? Did you go back to? Did you draw to? Or do you do it for each film individually?
I tend to do it each film individually. Same few stuff that there's always there at the back of my hand. Like obviously stuff like I don't know if you know Mark Lee, he's like a Taiwanese DP, or like directors like Edward Young, all that kind of framing. Colors wise, like Storaro, but with specifics of each film, I would have to have like different references of like style, genre. Yeah.
Was it like when you started out doing films? Can you talk a little bit about that? How that came about? Did you came into doing films?
It was quite funny because I studied mass communication. I wanted to be a journalist.
Okay.
And then in that mass communication course, there was actually, they made you do like a film production module. And then I realized that, oh, okay, this is quite fun, quite interesting. But I couldn't leave my course because I was already like halfway in. So I graduated from that. And then I went to university to study film, 4 years course. And that was a little bit more in-depth from what I had before, but still general filmmaking. And that's sort of where I discovered that I kind of like being a DP. And then after that, I went to do my master's at NFTS, and then now I'm here.
Okay. And then work started to roll in.
Yeah.
The work world there.
Yeah, I mean, in between when I was doing university, I was like trying to get to see what the market was like as well. So I was doing like camera assisting.
It's a great way to go about it. It came from communication, more or less.
Yeah. I think it's helpful. It's helpful. Definitely helpful.
Oh yeah. So what stories do you tend to go towards?
No preference right now, but I am waiting for horror to come in. Like I really want to do genre films. There's not a lot here in Singapore, but I'm hoping for like a horror to come in. That I can do like a feature of horror or something, or a series even.
This is so creepy. I can't do it. I watched a few of those Chinese ones. I was like, out. Those are really creepy.
Yeah. I actually hate watching horror films, but I just want to shoot it.
Yeah.
I think it helps with like your mind changing that when you watch it, it's actually not that scary because you know how it's done. Yeah. But
because that's so funny you're saying this, because we were visiting yesterday a company, and it was like in a skyscraper building, and you go with the elevator and you come out, and there's like this narrow hallways that you have to go through, and then you are outside where where the balconies are, and then you can enter all the office buildings. And I was so reminded by these movies because it was just the soft light coming in, and it was like but these patches of darks,
Yeah.
they're always there
the
somehow.
long corridor.
Yeah. That was really interesting. And a lot of white walls here, no?
A lot of white walls, not so much, not a lot of coloured walls. It's either white or wood. That's the best that you can get.
So how do you deal with white walls then?
It's a whole different ball game, but I mean, we try to stack a lot of furniture to break up the white walls. If we can, textures on the walls, or shoot into the corners so that it's a little bit more angled instead of, but likewise, that's where it's a bit hard, because I think that's where maybe we always try to go for like the one hard like shaft coming in, because it creates that very huge difference of like light and dark rather than like a wash, because then it's a bit difficult. But yeah, I still struggle with the white walls, to be honest.
It's logical.
Yeah.
It's Always kind of fighting that stuff. So When you say you're bringing in hard shafts of light, so do you tend to, without getting too technical, just tend to put like multiple sources to push it in like that?
Depends on the space. I
Yeah.
mean, if it's a small space and you only have like one or two windows to play with, I tend to just use one source. And then if it's a bit more, then yeah, I would have like, if I got space to spread out, I'll bring in like two, maybe maximum two, you know, but not a lot of like multiple shafts. Yeah.
And keeping the set as free as possible
Yeah.
for actors. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have an idea what's interesting you, where you want to go lighting wise, where you have the feeling that's something that you're pushing towards? What's interesting you?
I think for me, because of a lot of the scale of productions here that I've done, or even like overseas, the short films narrative that I've done is all smaller scale. So I think like I still need to push myself in terms of lighting for a bigger space, but still maintain or retain that kind of like ratio of light and shadow, and not create a space where it's like fully washed out. I think for me that feels like a big challenge to think in that scale. Yeah, so I think that's what I want to try and get more experience of in terms of lighting a bigger space, bigger, yeah.
Do you tend to like take out the sun here and then relight it as much as possible, or do you just try to go with the flow?
Indoors, I try to, but outdoors, you can't. But indoors, if I can, yes, because of the it's so unpredictable. Like I can't rely on the sun here.
Anything you've seen lately that's interesting you? Doesn't have to be films, books, whatever. Paintings?
There was this maybe like 1-2 years back, I was at this exhibition in London, UK, that really, it was a mix of like installation that had to deal with light and also space. And one of my favorite artists is Olafur Eliasson, and it's insane what he does with colors. And the experience of like, I think it was like a full yellow room, and then you go into a tunnel which is like smoke and just yellow.
Oh wow.
Which is quite strange as a feeling to go in, but when you step out, or when you're in there, it gets so calm. But when you step out, you get a little bit like anxious. There was also another exhibit where it was a room, like a dark room, fully dark room, and pendulums in the middle of the room that was swinging, and at each end of the pendulum was a light bulb. And you're walking around the swinging pendulum, and they were playing this ambient music, but I can't remember who is it from. I think it was a Japanese composer or something. And people were just like sitting there, and you just watch the pendulum, the light bulb swimming in this darkness, listening to the music. And yeah, so yeah, I think those kind of stuff, like the experience of it, is like trying to recreate that kind of experience, or how do you put that kind of experience into narrative or whatever that I do. Yeah, that is interesting.
I'm so 100% agree with what you're saying, is because there's so many artists out there that actually have been experimenting about so much more about lighting. Like when we think of yellow, it's not a common color at all, right? And then when you actually create a physical space and experience it, I had the same thing with James Turrell. Have you seen his work? It's incredible.
Yeah, so incredible, like what he does. Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what you said, because like when we think about it in the context of narrative, or like even commercials or whatever that we do, it's a color like yellow, for example, or these kind of colors are not common. We can't use it or we can't make it relevant, but when you actually get to experience it, it's not what you think it is, you know, and it's how we try and see what's the best possible way to sort of bring that to the table in what we do.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference between just being as a job as a cinematographer or being an artist, of what you're able to bring into that, you know, what outside of experiences we're talking about. You mentioned this earlier, just to touch on it, when you were saying about that it's more about feeling what you're having with lighting than in technical terms. Can you just describe that again?
So sometimes when I try to sort of figure out, or when like I get a script and I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I like this scene? I realize I tend to think about it in terms of like, what do I want to feel in this scene or in this space? And figuring out how to translate or communicate that with like my gaffer in terms of emotions of what I want in the light, it's not as easy, because sometimes I would say like, oh, I want this light to feel sad, or I want this light to feel strong, you know, but to them they might perceive that as like just, okay, big source, come in, bam, or okay, let's put a diffuser in front of it, like soften it, you know, sad. But there's so much more depth to it, you know, it's all about color, angle, quality. I mean, it's all about the technical aspect, but it's like, how do you sort of thread the fine line between, you know, that in terms of communicating that idea of what you want out of a light.
I mean, we're really struggling in the lighting industry because we don't have a language for that. How do you tend to, I mean, obviously what we're talking about is quality here, and the one thing is just technically how you're doing it. How do you bridge that?
I mean, for me, like, I'm not sure if it's like not really conventional or not a lot of gaffers appreciate it, but like, because I'm not technical, what I try to do is that in pre-production, I show them a lot of references of images of, like, some can be still, some can be like from exhibitions, from anything, and sort of like the kind of light that I want, and use quite basic descriptions and not technical, and then sort of try to see if they understand what I'm trying to go for. And I don't like to control what kind of lights they use, so I let them use what they want, but I try to really get them on the same page in terms of emotionally where I want the scene to be, which sometimes helps. And then on set, it's just me maybe like telling them to tweak it slightly. It's like, oh, move it here a bit, or raise it a bit, or like put something in front of it, or like break it up, you know, that kind of thing. So it does help the process a little bit when I have time for prep and I really show them what I want. Yeah.
And I think it's always a misconception about when you talk about these emotional parts on set, because it's not about not knowing what you're wanting to do. You know, sometimes it goes that way. It's actually it's really the opposite. It's like you're actually focusing on the only one important thing is how the audience feels, and not to lose track of that. And be true to that is something I think that is the utmost important thing that we can do, no?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and a lot of the times, like with so many things happening on set, you tend to forget that big aspect, you know. Yeah.
How do you get yourself to remember not to fall into those details?
Not easy, but I mean, it helps to step away sometimes. When like things get a little bit crazy, it helps to step away, take a deep breath, walk away from everybody in that sense. Or if you have a good leader, like your director, you just gotta look at them, get back into the conversation of why you're doing this, you know, and then refresh and go back in, you know. But most of the time it's not that easy because of everything happening at one go. Yeah, but it's just stepping away and coming back. Yeah.
Do you use music?
On set?
Or in general?
Yes, sometimes, but most of the time I think like meditation helps. I do meditation.
Oh, tell me about that.
I'm still new to it, but I do it. I try to do it every morning and every night before I sleep. It does help me focus a little bit more, and it sort of I find that it reminds me that I need to take a breath. Like no matter what I'm doing, sometimes I just need to step away from whatever that's happening and then come back again, because it's so much more productive than just standing there and like absorbing and trying to solve everything at one go. Like, it's okay. To me, it made me realize that it's okay to say, give me 5 minutes, I'm going to come back again. And then I come back fresher and better, you know, yeah.
Fantastic way to put it. Do you do it? Do you do guided meditation, like music plus?
Yeah. For now, guided meditation. Not so much with music. I think it's just like I just need. I have the app that does like a good soothing voice. Yeah. That sort of like brings me down.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was fun.
It was fun.
That was fun. Yeah.